Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Building a Business Development Culture, a Case Study. I'm Troy Parkinson with SagePresence, and we're thrilled to have you a part of our conversation today. A couple quick housekeeping notes. This is a webinar, so we're not able to see or hear you, but we'd love to interact with you throughout the presentation. So please feel free to ask questions within the Q&A window or feel free to chat in the chat window, as I'll be monitoring that throughout the process. And we love it to be an interactive experience. So if you have questions at any point, feel free to ask them throughout the process. Today's webinar is going to be moderated by SagePresence co-founder Pete Machalek. Pete has been with the company for 20 years and he is excited to share his insights about business development today. Joining Pete today is our guest speaker, Cailey Marcarelli. Cailey is going to be here to share about her personal experience helping her team expand their business development skills as a team. Before we get started, we want to get a sense of who you are and what brought you here to today's experience. So I'm going to run a quick poll, and as you see the poll come up, please feel free to answer the question. The first question is why are you here today? Are you here because you want to create a better business development culture for your firm, or you'd like to be a participant in a better firm culture? So would love to get your thoughts. We'll leave that open here to our current attendees and love to get your insight on this. As that poll is going, we got about still an opportunity there for folks to chime in. Right now it's looking at about 73% of folks want to create a better culture for their firm. So it's great to have you here. We're going to hear some insights on how to do that here today. So I'm going to end this poll. Thanks for everyone who could chime in on that one. I'm going to launch our next poll as well, understanding a little bit more about your firm's culture. So I'll launch this. How would you assess your own firm's culture? There's no engagement around business development, some engagement around business development, a lot of engagement around business development. And as those polls come in right now, what we see is there is some engagement around business development, with about 78% of the participants who are chiming into the poll. Give a few more seconds here for anyone else who wants to share their insight and share their thoughts on this poll. Once again, the question was, how would you assess your own firm's culture? And 78% of the participants today are saying some engagement around business development culture. So I'll end that poll and I'll share those results with everyone. You can see a sense of our numbers here today. And with that, I'm going to open it up to you, Pete, and begin the conversation.
All right. Well, welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Just a word of who we are before we get into things. So for many of you, you probably know that SagePresence is all about building confident presence for our clients. And very often what that translates to is it's confident presence for interviews when your team is faced off with a selection committee. Our company also helps the teams build confident presence for the long haul, for the bigger picture, building business development skills for your team members whenever they're interacting with prospects and clients, because it really is that warm confidence that's a huge part of why you get chosen. Now, probably the biggest application of what we do is culture. The biggest effect of it is culture. If you think about it, if everyone in your team exists to support each other's warm confidence, that's the very backbone of culture. And so if everyone is doing that, that everyone is participating more effectively inside of their business development process. And the reason we have Cailey here today is she is a person who has created a culture like that for her organization. So Cailey Marcarelli, she is Director of Marketing for SAA, which is an architectural firm based in California. Cailey, do you want to take a minute and just fill folks in on your background and the firm? It doesn't have to be anything huge, but just whatever you want folks to know about you.
Yeah, so I work at SAA. I'm our Director of Marketing. We are a national interiors and architecture firm, and with our 21-year tenure, we've boiled it down to servicing investor and occupier clients. And we design environments for all industries. So it's really given me a good perspective on what a variety of businesses need to make their business strategies successful. And I really focus that on the operational component, the design component, and then, as we're talking about today, the cultural components that go into that.
Fantastic. So I'd love to hear about any and all of those components, but of course we will be stressing that cultural one.
Right.
Now, before we get into it, I just want to make an invitation to the people who are participating in this webinar today. As I listen to Cailey's story, I'm going to be thinking from a certain perspective, and I kind of want to invite you all to think from a similar perspective. So I'm going to be listening to this like from what I know about so many of my client organizations. So many of my clients will respond to certain things that we try to implement with concerns and questions. Well, what about this? What about that? What about people who come to business development with this kind of resistance? So I want to invite all of the participants today to think about their firm, their organization, their team, and imagine as Cailey talks about the solutions that she implemented, imagine you attempting to implement that stuff and see if you can imagine what kind of obstacles, difficulties, challenges you might bump into as you do so, and then share a question with us. And if you want to be anonymous, I believe that is an option, but share your questions about, well, what about this? How did you do it like this? And we'll get to as many of those as we can in the moment. So let's jump into it. Yeah. So, Cailey, you started with SAA 3 years ago, is that right?
10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Oh, holy cow. Oh my gosh. Yes. Sorry. What was the picture like when you first joined the organization?
Yeah, so I've been there for half of its tenure. And so like many firms in their earlier years, it really was a culture of doing, do the job, do the next job, focus on doing the jobs well, but turning those jobs into new opportunities, turning them into new jobs was a phase that wasn't necessarily addressed in the beginning. So that was definitely a focus as I came on board.
The focus was shifting from this mentality of doing.
Yeah, more so addressing how to leverage the good work we do and turn that into future opportunity. So, we had the good work down, but really, how could we strategically use the good execution and pull more future sales, future development, future project work out of it?
Mm-hmm. Okay, gotcha. And how would you characterize the overall attitude towards business development when you first came on?
I definitely think it was something everybody knew should happen. And, obviously in its success in ways was happening, but there was a less formalized approach or concept or strategy around it. And as we talk today, you'll kind of see there's still not a strategy around business development, but there is a very thought through strategy that has triggered business development.
Interesting. Yeah. So, so it's like you've implemented something that that kind of inspires engagement as opposed to any sort of carrot or stick sort of thing.
Yeah, and I definitely think, when we were looking at it in the beginning, I think this is actually a issue in the corporate world in general, not necessarily our company, but with people identifying themselves by their job title or their assumed role. Like, we looked at the organization and we had, project managers and support staff and all of that. And there was a lot of, I'm this, therefore I can't possibly that. And so I think with that, we in general need to change that narrative. My example is like, everyone always asks a little kid, like, what you want to be when you grow up. And I kind of always think like, I want to raise a kid who can be capable and be strong and be independent and be creative. You can be good at your job and you can be in love with your job. But I think the idea that your identity is your job really creates some confusion within an organization. So really boiling that down and realizing that we wanted to build a company on the fundamentals of people, not the fundamentals of the job function, and shifting that and looking at it and kind of saying, we see everyone has a common interest, the industry they're in, the job they perform, but creating identities through job descriptions is kind of why I think people say we have a culture of, we can't have a culture of business development because engineers just aren't like that. Well, no, engineers are people, and people fundamentally want the same thing, the safety, acceptance, and independence, and guidance, and connection, and so wanting to embrace the person kind of shifted our idea of what truly we wanted to do from a strategy of culture.
Okay, let me see if this is fantastic, and I want to see if I can get as clear and specific as possible about what you're saying. What I'm hearing you say is there was some, at the beginning of your experience with the firm, there was some kind of self-resistance to the process of business development, and it had to do with how people thought of themselves. And so maybe it was like, I'm an engineer, or I'm just not a people person, or something like that. I'd love to hear some specifics about what you heard people say about themselves that kind of disqualified them for themselves as participating in the way that you were hoping that they would participate.
Yeah, and I think, again, all around kind of in every industry, it's kind of like, oh, well, project managers do that, or, we have a sales team. And I think what we were trying to look at and really identify was, we just want everyone to engage. We want to promote a company that is surrounded by individuals that are passionate about their work and feel a sense of individuality and feel a sense of connection. And so we looked at business development as an initiative, but you really can't start with one initiative. I think you have to just kind of address the fundamentals. So we really stopped and addressed the fundamentals and built this foundation up so that we could layer on initiatives. Because I think, explaining the purpose of the organization and getting people invested and start kind of having everyone understand their own drive to support the change. It's not really role specific. There's people that have different parts in rollouts depending on their role, but really the goal is that everybody shares the same purpose. And so we just looked at it like, we want to create a company that has a safe space for ideas, and that would be the backbone for exploring what everybody's kind of BD preferences were. And once we got to know the individuals, we knew how we would be able to execute.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay. So talk to me about what you mean when you say the fundamentals. So to me, what that sounds like is a, let's see. The first thing I'm hearing is when you talk about engagement, you're talking about a very broad sense of engagement. It's not just engagement in business development. It's like engaging your membership in this team, your participation in this firm as a whole. Mm-hmm. So talk to me a little bit more about the fundamentals that you focused on first. What exactly does that entail?
So, we wanted to look internally. We looked at it like we had a growing company and we grew very quickly. And, there's always waves of that in an organization. And we looked at it and decided the type of company we wanted to be, because that is what people are going to mimic, right? So you start building internally and you build this good organization, and you have individuals that feel supported in that firm. You have people loving what they do and where they work. They start telling others where they work, and how awesome the company is. That could in competition, but that also could bring people on board that want to work with us. That promotes a little bit of brand engagement in the industry. Our clients take notice, want to work with us. It's a whole wheel of that. And as that develops, the core of that wheel is how people feel being at their job every day. And so, you can't ask them to go sell something if they don't truly feel comfortable and happy in honestly the service or the type of product you might be selling. And so we took a step back, and when we really want to adjust not even adjust, we had a good natural culture, but really put a focus on culture and dedicated a lot of time to that, and then watched everything kind of grow from there.
Got it. Okay, so you were focusing on making this a place that people love to work at. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Kind of first and foremost. Let me back up just a little bit. And by the way, I do see that someone raised their hand, so we'll be soliciting that question in a second. Mm-hmm. When you first joined the firm, so you said it was 10 years ago, and the firm had been around for about 10 years at that moment. What was the situation that had the leadership bring you in the first place? Did they have something specific that they were bringing you in to do, or was there a problem they were trying to solve, or was there a goal they were trying to achieve?
No, I think, still in our hiring tactics, it's bringing in people that, want to invest and make a difference. But I am very much somebody that wants to fill a hole. So if I see a hole, I am very driven to kind of solve that problem. Mm-hmm. But I also think these problems couldn't be solved in one department. So while I grew a marketing department and that team, I pulled my resources and really looked at the key areas that were going to be needed to kind of be involved to disrupt everything, and kind of created a joint force in that way, because initiatives will fail if they come out of a singular team. Mm-hmm. There has to look like there's unity. There has to look like there's thought in more than just that tunnel vision of your team's goals. And so really looking at it and saying, how many people need to be involved here? What parts of the organization need to be involved to kind of disrupt the foundation a little bit, so people understand the entire foundation is changing, mm-hmm. and not just necessarily, some power going through one mm-hmm. department.
Great. So let's see. The question we got was kind of a simple one. Question is, how many folks are in your firm?
Yeah, so we have actually 3 companies under the SAA umbrella. So we have a project management firm, an MEP engineering company, and then our architecture and design services. So between the 3 companies, it's about 200 people.
Okay, great. Now, so you said a moment ago, initiatives won't succeed if they seem to just come from one team. Mm-hmm. I think they also won't succeed if they don't have leadership support. And it sounds like right from the get-go, you had support from leadership. Can you talk to me a little bit about your relationship with leadership around these initiatives that you've been pursuing?
That I think has been key. The response was amazing. I think they're kind of happy I was crazy enough to want to take it on. But, in that standpoint, communication really is key. Pointing out the concern and coming up with a solution. And then I really think confident execution is really important, in discussions with leadership. Keep it very high level, keep the momentum up, and communicate the impact really. And then I kind of have been looking at myself and our team as a central hub and a resource, so that, we kind of have to be half strategy, half tactical, right? And with a team that really has ears on the ground, because it's so important to kind of leverage that feedback. While conversations with leadership are very important, there is so many perspectives from employees. And if those employees don't feel heard and feel like their ideas are part of it, or their feedback is part of it, that creates a divide. And the last thing we want to do is divide something when we're looking to bring everything together with, within a community. And so while the leadership communication is very important, the firm-wide communication is equally as important.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about some of the logistics of that firm-wide communication? I mean, 200 people is kind of a lot. I can't imagine that all 200 of you are at any one time having a huge shared conversation, especially in these kind of virtual times. So how do you communicate amongst this 200-person company?
Yeah, it's funny because once we kind of moved mobile, the cross-office, cross-company collaboration actually grew, because it was a lot easier to get 200 people on a Zoom than it was to get 200 people in one of our offices. So we actually found it very beneficial. Some of the trainings, communications, meetings we had that were office-centric moved to firm one implementation. And it was interesting because it did create a very different conversation. So there has been a really huge benefit to kind of hybriding the in-person and virtual conversation with us. But, as far as identifying how to communicate and having people heard, we use an innovation implementation model. So everyone can contribute, because I really think, before people start at the organization, they have all these experiences. Everyone's day-to-day experiences are different. And so that all generates idea making. And so we want everyone to feel like they can have a centralized hub to share those innovative ideas. But what we've made sure to communicate with that is that the execution of those, so that it's thorough and done globally, we're the central source. So we implement, but we encourage everybody to provide that feedback, feed that to us. And so that we kind of can look at it and say, that's so great for these elements. This is so great for those elements. And this is how they connect. And then we're able to create a rollout that's effective because it's hitting everybody. So there's so much goodness I'm sure every company sees that's in teams or in offices, but we really wanted to make that goodness shared throughout the company so that there was more of a process, more of a set way of doing things, kind of the SAA way, as we call it, so that all that goodness can come from somebody and be shared with everybody.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay, so it sounds like you put some tools in place that allow folks to make themselves heard, to share their ideas. Is that an anonymous thing, or does it not need to be that?
It is both. And I think this is what we, I kind of mentioned in the beginning, we were really wanting to identify, what people want, right? And so being heard is definitely one of them, but some people do feel more comfortable lobbing an idea and not necessarily being associated with it. Other people want to be part of the process of the idea making. So similar to how we communicate to our staff, we really wanted to be able to have our staff have all of those ways to communicate with us. So, you hear that like everybody retains information differently, right? Receives information differently, like auditory, visual, reader, doer. And so delivery is key. So when we're communicating, we make sure to hit all the ways, because a lot of resistance to change or change of culture or shift is just kind of a fear or a misunderstanding of what's going on. And so that resistance can come from not communicating the way that people receive information. So we just want to make sure that we're providing people every outlet to receive the information the right way. And to your question, we provide them every outlet to provide that feedback or provide that idea to us. Some people do want to call us and have a conversation. Some people want to email. Some people want it to be anonymous. Some people want a detailed response. Some people want to show us. And so that two-way communication is very important, because like we were talking about, same as internal versus external, you mimic that behavior. And so it's really important to make sure those are similar.
Yeah. Okay. So again, so flying the helicopter back up for a moment, it really sounds like the one biggest overarching focus that you implemented from day one, and maybe continue to implement, is this commitment to having every team member really, really enjoy being a member of this team. So it sounds like you're focused on a goal more than solving a problem. Is that part true so far?
That's very fair. And I think we have seen that has solved a lot of the problems. So yeah, I think that goal of staying true to that belief and, making sure everyone feels like their individuality is honored, and customize their experience with our company, and all of those things are really, again, just a goal, but they've had some amazing results in other facets of our business.
Got it. So how are you how are you defining success? I mean, team happiness is a fantastic concept, and I imagine it's difficult to measure. So is that do you look at certain metrics that can be argued to measure their happiness?
There's the obvious conversations about turnover and all of those things, right? And so, as we do with any other business does, we definitely look at kind of those standard ideas, but really it's funny because our philosophy of kind of, and now it's a little more blended, but pre-mobile working, you were at work more than you were at home. And so we wanted to create an environment so that people felt like there was, like, we don't believe in work-life balance. We've always believed in work-life integration, because it's very unrealistic that somebody can stop their life for 9 hours of the day, right? And then focus on work and then shift back. So we've always had this very fluid idea of that. And that we saw was very successful. And the goal of that is really to get rid of any of the stresses for people and give them an outlet, whether they're, working on a hard project or had a bad day at home or whatever it may be. We wanted to make sure everyone had an outlet that applied to them so that they could do what they do best and not worry about the rest. And so a lot of process and a lot of automation and a lot of, providing them resources, we really realized it was more than just tools for their job function. It was life tools, it was life support, it was, all of these things. And if we were able to alleviate some friction points, that was very successful, because, that makes them happier, and a happier person creates a happier community, which creates a happier, industry around it. So we really looked at it as, this is more than just helping them in their job. This is helping people if they are using their job to escape, or if they need, more support, or they need to figure out what that looks like. It was not a one size fits all model. So we have a process that is there, but the variation of that process for each individual is very different.
Yeah, I would think that it would have to be. So I'd love to dig into that a little bit deeper. So the AEC world is kind of notorious for having a fair amount of introverts, people who are not exactly known for their communication skills. And as a result, I can imagine, a fair percentage of your team are kind of have their own communication preferences that might be um, that might be challenging one way or another. So it might be hard for you to know exactly what you need to do to be able to get them to fill you in on what they want, or maybe they don't even know what they want. Maybe it seems like there's maybe a thing that needs to be in place is a fair amount of self-awareness. So how do you contend with that? How do you contend with different people having different levels of ability to know themselves and to communicate their thoughts?
Yeah, and it starts with we'll start basic, right? Like we kind of boiled it down to what questions, what asks could we have that really anyone, despite no matter what their comfort level is with communicating or sharing about themselves and whatever that is, what are some basics that we could go through, right? And we've seen a huge shift over the last couple of years. There has been more personal integration in life, sharing, people see what your rooms look like, on Zoom and everything. So there is a little bit more ease, I think, over the last couple of years of people feeling like they can share a little bit more, pets and whatever it is that they see in your home office. But we definitely made sure to ask some basic questions. We gauge those basic questions, and see what the responses were. And we're like, okay, everyone's pretty comfortable with this. Let's push it a little more. Let's start asking some basic questions that could, something as basic as when we were hosting events in our office, we made sure everybody communicated to us what time of day during the workday they felt most social. So some people, come into work raring to go and want to start their job and can decompress at the end of the day. Other people, the end of the day is the most stressful time because all the project work comes in and they want to spend their morning, being more around people and having that social outlet. So we were asking those kind of questions and people were like, these are a little odd. But then as we started implementing, after we came up with that strategy, we were cultivating events centered around people's social times, for example, because you can't force a happy hour if people don't want to socialize in the afternoon. Like that's a very basic, concept. So we wanted everybody to have an outlet. Now that might not have at the time brought everyone together at one moment, but it did create these little pockets of social outlets. Then suddenly somebody wants to see what's going on and join the other pocket, right? And so that's a very, very simple example, but people felt like they weren't being forced to do something out of their comfort zone, or when they weren't ready for it, or when they weren't prepared mentally to shift gears. And I think those are really important, small, tiny little things that pay tribute to somebody's needs, right? And so that builds trust. And then they start trusting when we send out events that they are thought through, that they might, touch on everybody's comfort level. And really then also looking at it and saying, like, we see potential in maybe somebody engaging successfully in a different outlet, and how we can reach out to them and have those conversations and see why they might not be. But again, this is all internally, because you can see in any organization, people even have a hard time talking to each other, right? And so that has definitely grown more trust. And then therefore, from a job performance level, people reach out and ask questions and, want to get help from a professional side. And it's really been lovely to see kind of how that has built a kind of net of support for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So what I'm hearing is you're asking questions to get inside of people's heads, to understand what their preferences are. And then you're using that information to come up with team activities that fit in with, as you said, different pockets of the team, so that you're always coming up with something that's a good fit for some subset of your team, so that whoever is participating feels like it's a good fit for them. Nobody ever puts themselves into something that they don't want to do, because you're doing enough kind of different things.
Exactly. And I mean, that's coming from, even if we, send a gift, whatever it may be, and we're noticing our staff's coming to us and being like, hey, I heard this client really loves X. Could we cultivate something around that? And so we're watching now, because we're doing it internally, that it's causing people to think that way about clients, and kind of hone in on some of those specialty customization, items that they may like, and reach out to us to help support that experience for our client, because we gave them that similar experience and they liked the way it made them feel.
Okay, so can you talk a little bit more about that? What I just heard you say is you sort of demonstrate a certain way to interact with other people by doing it with your team members, and then in certain circumstances, you're asking these team members to do this very thing that they were just on the receiving end of with their prospects and customers. So how do you go about making that ask?
Yeah, we don't ask. It completely organically happens, because we've made it we've just kind of really honed in on our employees. And I think that has made a understanding of kind of what that ultimate feeling, that ultimate goal is. And we have not asked them to think that way. We in fact have said, we don't expect you to think that way. If you have somebody that you want to honor, if you want to have somebody you would love to get together with, send it over to our team, and we'll do the internet stalking, right? We'll do all the things. We'll do the customization. And so we've kind of taken it off their plate. We're not even asking them to do it, but we're finding, because we eliminated that point for them, the people that are interested in helping do, the people that want it set up for them still ask us to do it. And it's happening either way. We're just not asking them to curate it themselves, because like I kind of said, we want them to focus on their job that they're good at, and their communication and their execution, and let us do the things that we're kind of trained in and have perspective on. And then let's collaborate on it and have that deliverable be together. And so I think that's what we're really trying to promote, is just it isn't about one person. It's not about one team. It's not about one department. It's everybody kind of leveraging the skills they have to come together for the best output. So that's been more successful to us than the ask, I guess.
Okay, so that sounds revolutionary to me. That sounds so different from so much of what I've heard from so many of my clients. And the BD expert on my team would be saying, wait, what? You're not specifically asking team members to do specific BD activities on a regular basis and report back to you and be measured in X, Y, and Z ways. So
let me clarify. We do have a very extensive, CRM process and documentation on things like that, but really where that is leveraged more is to supply the next person meeting with that individual a safeguard, some information, something that they can take with them that makes them more comfortable with that conversation. So we do definitely have a, like I said, like we document, touch points and all of the things. We definitely do that, but our use of them isn't running metrics on this person had X touch points this week. We don't talk as much about that. What we use it for is, now we have this amazing directory of clients and of contacts and of partners that we work with that we want to feel like we are one united front, one united company. So any, info share is fantastic. You never want to be asked the same questions 18 times. And so that part of it, but it also gives those people that are a little bit newer to business development some conversation starters. It gives them some information about somebody. It's not a blind date at that point. It's, they're coming in, they feel like they might know them. They feel comfortable because maybe somebody at the company they work with a lot speaks very highly of this person, and now they feel very comfortable working with them. And so we use that a lot. And I saw one of the questions, like someone new to business development, do it that way. Find some information about somebody so it's not such a cold conversation. And everybody, and Pete, you and I have talked about this in the past, but like, I am not going to dive in if I meet you and start pitching our firm. That's not me. I'm going to probably talk about something personal and make a connection that way. Other people are way more comfortable talking industry. So, we look at who our people are and what they like talking about and try to match it up that way instead, because you can't have somebody talking about the company if they're not necessarily as acclimated, newer to business development, just being in a room talking to strangers. And so we try to figure out what the most comfortable parts of that are for somebody and just say, focus on that. Here's some tools for it, and focus on that. Here's some questions to tee you up, but don't go out of your comfort zone. Focus on what you're good at and what kind of conversations you're good at having, more so than saying like, here's a sales script, we demand you say this, and so that way it's just more about relationships. We don't make it about sales, we make it about relationships. And when you boil it down to that, it goes back to the comment I made earlier about like, people are people. And so everybody kind of has the same needs and wants and connections there. And so when you kind of take that intimidating part out of it, it's just about people talking.
Yes.
And that's kind of the way we look at it.
Yes. Okay. So one thing I'm hearing here is the conversation about business development inside of the organization. It's either not explicit at all, or it's you just hold off on it until people kind of ask for it. Is that a fair characterization?
I mean, I think we look at BD like fuel, right? Like we love the way our car runs, so we need to make sure it has gas, right? And we really want to take care of the car. So we don't push business development ever, and it doesn't even grow to a conversation that we push it. We just promote client experience. And if you want to, peel it back one more level, we promote positive experience in any interaction, internally, externally, whatever it may be. And we just use our internal approach as a model of how we would love our external interactions to be. And so, you kind of have to look at it too, like there's a lot of people probably on this call and in an organization that owners, leaders, they have ownership of this company, right? They care about it, not more, but in a different way. And employees don't have that ownership. So while there are incentives to, BD and bringing in work, it's a different type of care. It's a different type of driver, right? And so we want to make sure to engage all of our employees from an external client-facing business development concept at the core of their own drivers. You can't necessarily promote the company drivers on an employee. So we've shifted that too, right? So that's where I think a lot of firms do metrics and all these things, but there's no real conversation around what is the independent driver of that person to want to do these tasks. And so I think when you boil that back and look at that strategy, it's you come up with a different answer and a different approach than if you're looking at it as business development.
Mm-hmm. Oh, great. Okay, so let me see. I'm trying to get to some sort of basic principles here, and one thing that I'm definitely seeing that you've said multiple times is it's a human being centric philosophy. You see each member of your team as as the human being that you are, and that they are, and you are, you're learning about them, and you're having the rest of your team learn about them as a human being, and it's kind of like you're tracking certain things about those folks as human beings to make sure that they get what they want and need as a member of the team.
Mhm.
Are there specific things that you're specific sort of data points that you're looking to collect about team members that you then want them to collect about prospects and clients? Are there specific questions that you're consistently asking and that you're inspiring your team members to consistently ask?
I think that from a fact-finding standpoint, right, we're looking at it more so. I think what their, again, like personal interest is, what their reason is for doing whatever they're doing. What's your reason for wanting to redesign a space? What's your reason for wanting to work here? What's your reason for all these things? And just be careful with that, to not peg somebody, meaning that might be their reason at that moment in time. But you cannot kind of check that off as like, well, we figured that person out, let's go to the next. And if there has been anything over the last couple of years, it's to never kind of be okay with the thinking something is not situational. So like you can't be okay with the status quo. You have to evolve, and you have to be flexible, and you have to remember that it is a very fluid situation, because people are, I'll feel something different in 5 minutes than I did 5 minutes ago. So it's you really have to pay attention to that, and really not kind of look at it as, well, now I've cracked the case, and instead look at it that it's going to constantly be evolving, and our employees, our clients are all going to want different things. But if you kind of buy into the fundamentals that you're trying to figure that out, and the fundamentals that it's, kind of an inherent want, and all of that, the tactical can change, like, right. The rollout can change. The container is very different now than it was 2 years ago. Business development in a virtual world, I'm sure everybody saw the adjustments and the impact of that. But if the foundation is there and built, and there's an understanding that, somebody's just looking to connect, it doesn't matter if it's on Zoom, it doesn't matter if it's in a room of 200 people, there's still going to be that ability to do so, even though the situation may be different, because we're just trying to identify that. But as employees grow, as their roles change, as experience, a first-time business developer, first-time networker, whatever you guys want to identify it as, but somebody going to an event for the first time is going to be very different than that person's confidence level going in 10 events from now. So we need to stay on our toes to make sure that we're still hearing what their fears are, what their needs are, what makes them feel safe, what makes them feel equipped, because it's not always going to be the same thing. And so finding that out is key. So to answer your question, like, it's the same, but it will always be changing.
Got it. So one big thing that I heard is it's questions about motivation. What problem are they trying to solve? What's their definition of success? And those two things can change all the time.
Definitely.
Okay, great.
I wanted to jump in here because we have a handful of questions that I wanted to make sure that we get to before the end of our session here. So let me go do kind of a lightning round of questions as we come up to the last 10 minutes of our afternoon. Circling back to the question that came in earlier from the geologist who spent more time on a drill than in business development, as his question stated. What are the best networking tools that you've utilized, and how has your work changed in COVID and during this pandemic time?
Yeah, so, to bring it back to your core, your tools are really your past. You were a geologist. Like, that is an incredibly interesting trade, and it's something that is a differentiator for you. So you're going into business development having this knowledge base and having this experience core that nobody else had. And so, talking about a good opener, but there's don't think of it like a script. Don't think of it as these bullet points you have to hit. As you're networking, it's really has to maintain its organicness. But I would play into your background. I would, I'm not sure if you're in the same industry now and you're trying to sell those tools, but at the same time, play into that. You could be selling shoes today, but that somehow is going to hit an interest point in somebody else, right? And your experience. And so I don't even think it's about the service or the product you are currently invested in. It's more so just sharing what you're about. And you have a very interesting background. And so I definitely think that's something that should propel your comfort level when talking to people, because you can go to an industry event and everybody might know a little bit about the industry, right? But if you're in a situation where nobody would know about that, that is an amazing talking point. And so I think with that, to address the second part, times change with COVID. We're still doing reach outs. Obviously in-person events have changed, but it's almost been we used to be able to focus on a group of 20, 50, 100 at a time and kind of, create an experience for all those people. We'd host events, we'd go to events where you'd be able to, cultivate hubs in that experience. COVID has adjusted it that it's been very much more one-on-one. So the interactions have been more independent of each other. You're not necessarily going to have your whole team on Zoom while you have a quick conversation with somebody. So it's changed to be more personal, I want to say, because you're having one-on-one conversations. So if anything, it's kind of expedited what you get to know about people. And you don't have 5 people there and you're kind of making small talk. You're kind of diving into you. And it's a little more, like I said, personal, because we've seen the world people are living in, and it's a lot more, it brings more into the conversation.
Yeah, let me hop onto that briefly, Troy, and then you ask the next question. So I love what you said, Cailey, about bringing your unique perspective into a networking conversation. There really is only one you, and if you bring your unique identity into that conversation, that's intrinsically interesting because of your uniqueness, whether you're a geologist or not. Second thing is, be interested in learning about the person that you're talking to. And I think that jibes with a huge part of what you've been saying, Cailey, that it really is, you need to put the other person front and center as you lead a conversation so that you can just ask about who they are and be interested in who they are. And that will build a relationship far more than any conversation about what your firm does or what your services are.
Definitely. And I think that does go to, like, you just want to be heard, right? And so if we're sending people to a networking event or some sort of engagement, I would prefer somebody comes back with one really close connection. Like, don't be in a conversation with somebody and promote, like, make sure you give out 10 business cards, because all you're doing in that conversation, nobody wants to talk to me if I'm, kind of eyeing who I'm going to be speaking to next. And so just promote one good connection, because that's going to take everybody way further than, collecting 10 cards and coming home and then having to make 10 awkward introductions that probably won't stick, So really it is about that ability to make people feel like you want to be there with them.
It's more about depth than breadth.
Yes.
Excellent. We've got 2 more questions that I'll offer up before the end of the hour. The first is, one person wrote in, my company currently doesn't have company-wide meetings. Do you find these important for business development? Some people think it's a waste of time to bring everyone together. What are your thoughts on group BD meetings?
Wow.
I don't think they're successful for business development. I think they're incredibly successful to build buy-in to your company. I think it's so good to have people of all levels, of all departments, come together and hear different people speak. I pull a lot to this day from those meetings, and hearing how people explain something, or hearing or even seeing a mannerism or whatever it is. I am attracted to something in those, and it would vary every single time. And it's not always necessarily the speaker. It could be somebody that I'm just watching on video while they're talking. It's another employee, but I don't think there's any benefit. We don't use them from a business development perspective. But there is something that creates that commonality. There is something that creates that culture that we love to have that experience together. And I think it's really important to continue that, because, we now have onboarded a lot of employees that don't know what it's like to work in an office with us, because they've been onboarded over the last 18 months. And so it's a wonderful opportunity for those people to feel connected to the driver, which should be the company they work for, right? They're not alone. And so some people may cringe at the idea of sitting on a call for an hour with 200 people, while other people, candidly, may live alone or love the engagement or really want the connection. And so that's a tool in your toolkit. There's another one that doesn't have everybody on a call that might be successful for that other group, but to give everybody the community to have each one of those tools is really important.
Mm-hmm. And is it safe to imagine that you believe that these meetings inspire business development, even though they're never explicitly about it?
I think they're idea starters, and whether it falls into the business development category or another category that through the evolution of the idea probably lands with us getting more clients, right? They're always idea starters. After those, I get a lot of reach outs from people being like, I heard this, how about this? Or, hey, I wanted to share this. And it creates that conversation, which, if you want to look at it from a business development perspective, is great practice, right? It's an internal conversation, because if I'm out talking to a client and I hear a client say something, the fact that I would reach out and say, oh my God, I saw this article about this, how wonderful, is the same practice that you would do internally. So it really does kind of just promote those behaviors, and those behaviors may result in business development, right? May result in a sale, but those are just fundamentally good behaviors to have.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Well, I'll leave with this final question, because I like the way you described this, and then someone asked the question about it. Can you give a couple of examples of what life integration looks like for your team versus work-life balance?
So it's funny, because when I interview people, and I'm always like, we don't believe in work-life balance, everyone's like, what? And then I'm like, no. Stick with me. It's definitely the idea. So we host a group of high schoolers every year that are interested in going into our industry. And honestly, the majority of the conversation with those high schoolers is about how to pay your car insurance and do your taxes, and have these just kind of life traits. That is a very young example, but the idea that work-life integration is there comes not only from the flexibility to be able to say openly to your manager, I have to pick my kid up from school, I'll be back on at 6:30. That there's a great culture there, because people feel like, honestly, they're transparent in what's happening. There's not I'm sick today, even though they have to go do something. It's really open. We're very open. And we just expect good work and good follow through. And when and how that happens, we have a lot of autonomy with our staff on that. And that is, I think, especially something I promote in my team. I never want to be that manager where somebody is just saying I don't feel well, I can't come in. You want them to be like, hey, actually, I need a day. I just need a day. In going back to the life tools, it's really about transparency and honesty and naturally feeling connected. And remembering that it's all about just your inherent wants, your inherent needs, your inherent fulfillment. And if you can use that as a foundation to build on what might be, missing for somebody, or might be something somebody wants to take on, and you can build on those essential skills and essential momentum, I think you can end up being really successful without trying it as a big BD effort.
As a final question for our group today, is there one key thing people should think about as they're creating a BD plan for their team?
I think there's two things. I think one is make it organic, because you really need to, as I mentioned, hone in on those special things that will make it different than another company's or another individual's. And so make it organic, because it becomes uncomfortable if not. And really truly remember that business development is people oriented. While it is a action promoting a sale of a product or a service, it's really about how you make somebody feel. So if you put a focus on how you make somebody feel, the rest of it kind of falls in line as well.
Yep. I love this idea of making it organic, because each professional kind of has his or her own strengths to take advantage of. You want to make sure that what you're having them do takes advantage of those strengths.
Definitely.
Excellent. Well, thank you both for being here today. It's been a pleasure to have you, and a pleasure to dive deep into the art and science of business development. For everyone tuning in, you will be able to get a recording of this. Watch for an email to your inboxes. As well, we want to let you know about our upcoming webinar in December, Elevate Your Interviews, Insights from Selection Committee Members. That will be December 15th, 2021 at 1 p.m. Central Time. If you have any questions at any point, feel free to reach out to us. You can call our number or reach out to us through our website at sagepresence.com. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, guys.